Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick Glance. Today we will take a quick glance at the BTP Setup Automator. So let's switch to the screen. You should see now the blog post that announced the arrival of the BTP Setup Automator in March. The BTP Setup Automator was initially created by Rui, as you can see here, and it's available as an open source project. Now, the big question is, what does this BTP Setup Automator do? Well, that's already written down here in the very first paragraph of the blog post. Basically, it's a script that automates the setup of the SAP Business Technology platform. So what you get is, you get a Python script plus a Docker container that contains all the tools that you need to set something up on BTP. Now, of course, depending on what you want to achieve, you have to install quite some stuff somewhere, probably on your machine, like the Business Technology Platform CLI, the Cloud Foundry CLI, maybe the MTA build tools, Kubernetes-specific tools like kubectl, like the OIDC plugin, like Helm or something like that. So there is quite some stuff that you have to do. And this tool should make your life easier by, first of all, providing that in a pre-configured way, and also abstracting the setup a bit away, as you can see it here on this screen, by defining so-called parameters and use case files. Now, the big point always with those tools is how to get started. And we want to throw now a short, quick glance on how to get started and what might be some points where you might stumble across and you might say, why isn't that working? So where do you find all the information about this tool? It's all available on the GitHub repository under the organization of SAP samples, and then BTP Setup Automator. There you already find quite some information about setting things up and how to use things, and there is an FAQ section and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, if you are using this thing for the very first time, maybe you're not very familiar with Docker, maybe you struggle with some setup on your machine, well, this video should now help you to get over the very first points where you might stumble. First things first, as I said before, the tool is leveraging Docker. So the tool is supposed to run inside a Docker container. And as you might know, there have been some discussions around the changes of the subscription terms of Docker Desktop that you need for Windows, for example, as on this machine. So please be aware of that. It's free in some circumstances, like non-commercial open source projects, or for educational and learning purposes, or for small companies. Otherwise, you have to pay for that one. There are alternatives like Podman or something like that, but I'm using Docker now, as I think that's still the most common used one. And it's also the easiest one to set up on Windows. As you can see from the lower part of my screen, I'm using Windows because there are indeed some more, I wouldn't call it challenges, but some points that you have to keep in mind when working with that tool. Now, what do you have to do? You have to download Docker on your machine in order to have that available. And then you have to download the repository. You can do that, of course, via forking the repository and downloading it, or you directly clone it here from the original repository. Now, I already did that. So as you can see here within my console, I have everything in place. And now the first thing that you probably want to do is you want to run that thing. And within the description, there are two ways how to run it. It's somewhere here. So you have those run files within the root of your cloned repository. And you have two flavors of them. One is running from registry, which means the Docker image gets pulled from the GitHub package area where we pre-built the image. Or you can build it yourself from scratch on your machine. There are 3 scripts to do that. One for macOS and Linux, one for the command prompt of Windows, and one for PowerShell, or to be precise, PowerShell Core. So you can run that on any platform because PowerShell Core is cross-platform. I'm using PowerShell Core now, and I will use the hardcore expert path and use the run.ps1 command. So I want to build it myself. The reason for that is that there are some things that you might stumble across. So we are here, we have the run.ps1. So we say .run.ps1. We will start that, and bam, we get errors. Oh, let's stop that. There is an error during the connect. So it first tries to clean up the images. That's what the script does. Now this error might indicate that the Docker daemon is not running. That's usually the first error that you get, or I often get that when I start working on, let's say, Monday, and I don't have Docker on the auto start list. So don't get nervous here. It's just the Docker daemon not running. So what you have to do is start the Docker desktop app that we will do now. This might take a bit. So let's see. As you can see in this icon here in the lower corner, it's already starting up. And it's still starting up. Take your time, little Docker. We are waiting for you. Now, when Docker is up and running, as you can see it here now, it's available. So we can give it another try because now the Docker daemon is running. So let's do a run.ps1. Okay, there is an error response for the daemon. There is no container. That's okay. We do not have the container yet, so we will build it. Now, as you have seen here, that was in real time, that was quite fast. Why was that quite fast? Because I already built it. So there is some caching in there of the images that are used. So when you do that the very first time, be a bit patient. Grab a cup of coffee. That might take a bit. Now, the image is running, so you can check that from the dashboard. We have here the BTP Setup Automator that is running. We have built that by our own. And now how to connect to that one. There are different ways to do that. One way is to use Visual Studio Code. So I have opened up my Visual Studio Code, and now I'm opening the command palette by Control-Shift-P. And there you have one command that is called remote containers attached to a running container. If you use that, Visual Studio Code will use its server-client architecture in order to connect to the container and then open up a Visual Studio Code front end on your machine that is working from the container, or the Visual Studio Code core is served from the container. So let's use that one. Visual Studio will then check, is there any container running? And yes, we have one container running, which is the BTP Setup Automator. So let's take that one. And as you can see here, a new Visual Studio Code window is opening up. And it's starting the so-called dev container. So it's installing the server on the machine or on the container, opening things up. And here we go. So as you can see here, we have now the remote container running. Now, in order to have that functionality, which in Visual Studio Code, you have to install the remote extensions. I can show that quickly because you might not have that. If I open the extensions, you can search for remote. And there you have this remote container extension that will give you that functionality that I have just shown you. There are also other ones like remote SSL, WSL, remote SSH, and so on. So whatever you want to do, give it a try, but that one is needed in order to have that functionality available. Now, once you have that, as you can see, we are now really in the container. I have no longer a PowerShell here or a Windows shell. I am on an Ash because I am in a Linux container. Now, you might, when you start things the very first time, you might not see this folder structure of the container. You might see an empty explorer with a button that tells you open a folder. If that is happening, all is fine. Just click on the button, take the default path that is shown to you, which is user home. And then it will connect, or it will display this file system. The reason for that is that, well, in the very first try, it doesn't know how, if it should show you the directories. But of course you want it. And as you can see here, the entry point is the working there is the home folder of this user that we create in the container. So just open up that one and you will see this structure. Now, what do we want to do? Basically, we want to start the BTP Setup Automator. And for that, we have this little script here, which is a Python script. No, I don't want to install Python now. There's Python extensions. Yeah, so why not get things started? BTPSA, that should be good. Oh, another error. It tells me there is no such file or directory like Python. What do you mean with that? There should be Python here, and if we do a Python -- version, you will see that there is Python installed. So what's the issue here? It's connected to Windows and connected to the build of the container. If you would use, let's shortly check that. For example, this command here, run from registry, you would get a pre-built container that was built on a Linux machine. Now what we did, we built the container, we used the Linux image, but we are running on a Windows machine. With that, some settings come up, how files are used to pass, and that kicks us here because this file has a very specific file ending that Linux cannot work with. Now, if we have this file open, you can see it also down here in the lower area, select end of line sequence. So you can now fix that by setting that here to LF and save it. You can do that via preferences, settings, and then search for EOL, that's end of line. And as you can see here, the default line ending is auto, which means the operating system specific end lining is used, and that's for Windows is this one. But we need that one. You can also set that up globally on your machine. You can do that whenever you directly connect to that one, or you make it very easy. You just use the one that we provide from the registry. Now we have changed the line ending. Now let's see if that works. And here we go. It starts up. Now, of course, there is some information that we have to key in. That's all described within the repository. I will not go into details here. I will just abort the processing and highlight some other things that are important for you. So we are now able to start the engine, so to say. But we also need to provide, of course, parameters. and those use cases. Here, as you can already see, there is a parameter.json file with some information like the email, the login method, what sub-account name do you want to use, org ID, and so on and so forth. And we also have some use cases here under the use case directory. I would go for the released ones because that are the ones that we tested, where you have, let me close that one, a lot of information in here about the use case. So some metadata information, some related links that might help you. And then the services that you want to create, like the XSUA service, the HANA Cloud service, or a sub-launchpad application. And you have to fill it, whatever you want to do. Like if you want to set up an IIS, if you want to set up an ABAP Steampunk, if you want to set up schema, then you have to do all that, filling in, keying in the data in those JSON files, what to set up and how to set that up and what parameters to provide. And then the script can work with that and will call all the different tools and command lines. So let's just open a terminal again, and let me shortly show you that all the stuff is here. So we have the BTP CLI, as you can see here. I will put that away. I will make that a bit bigger. So welcome to the BTP CLI. You don't need to install it. It's already there. Then we have the CF CLI. Again, here we go. It's available out of the box. You do not have to install that locally. We have kubectl there. So the Kubernetes CLI. We have Helm installed. So if you want to use Helm charts, you can also do that. So already from that perspective, the tool is super helpful because you do not need to install that one. Nevertheless, the real magic happens when you fill in those files. And now you might say, I need there quite some information to key in that might be hard to grab. Well, yes and no. There is quite some support for you that you can already guess from this very first line here. For all the JSON files, we provide so-called JSON schemas that help you with filling out the files. So there is, on the one hand side, a validation of the files, so that you cannot put in something that's not valid, at least not valid from the point of view of the schema file. And it also gives you some type ahead support, and also gives you the valid values if there are dependencies between values. So as best as we can. That there might be gaps, I'm quite sure. Where do you find that stuff? You find that under libs, and there you have a BTP SA parameters JSON and a BTP SA use case.json, and those are exactly the yep, that's okay for me. The schema files. And as you can see here, we have about this use case, that's an object, and there is a title which has a name, and you will in a second see what all this stuff means. And here you see there are two values that you can put in here for the end title only. There is also a default value, so you do not need to provide that. So you have to work through that, or you just take an existing use case file and adopt that. If you are unsure if a parameter is available or not, then you can take that one for the use case or that one for the parameters. Okay, so now let's see how that works out with the parameters.json file again. So as you can see here, we have a region. Now maybe I want to create a schema cluster, and for that I need a cluster region. Yeah, let's see what we get here. So basically that would be, okay, cluster region for the SAP BT Schema runtime cluster. This parameter is used as default for schema. That looks good, so I will take that one. And I already get the ones here proposed. So let's take EU Central 1. Now, there is a dependency between those two. So let's go to US, I don't know, 21. And as you can see here, in US 21, the EU Central 1 is not supported. You can see that by that curly underlining. So let's see what's supported here. Okay, those are different ones. So let's take that one. And we are valid again. So this really helps you a lot with filling out the parameter and the use case.json file. Of course, you have to have some understanding on how the mechanics roughly work, but I think that really helps a lot. And with those files, you can then continue and go on with the creation of your use cases. I will not go into details here for that, so just then jump to the official documentation. Now, with that, I hope I have shown you some points where you might stumble across, especially if you're using Windows and you do this local build thingy to get you started a bit quicker. Now, you might, of course, find issues. You might think about there might be something to improve. You can all do that here on the GitHub repository, for example, via issues. You can open up an issue. There are basically two types of issues. If you find a bug, file an issue. If you would like to see something, put in a feature request. We have everything templated, so this will give you already a bit of a better guidance on how to do things. And if you're not sure about something, we also open up GitHub discussions, so you can do that. And as you can see, there could be a bit more action happening here. So if you would like to see something, if you think that there should be something to discuss about the involvement, something to discuss about JSON schemas, I don't know what, feel free to open it up and let's see where it takes us. Now, with that, I'm at the end of the quick glance. I hope I had some stuff for you, and I hope this makes your life easier with getting started with the BTP Setup Automator. And yeah, with that, see you next time at another quick glance. Until then, bye.